Welcome to my channel, Bobbins and Books. I'm Hannah, and here we sew together, read together, sometimes game together. We do a little bit of everything here. Today, I'm starting a new series exploring how style and dress changed throughout the French Revolution. I received this book for Christmas, and it immediately inspired me to do a deep dive. This is going to be a multi-part series. I'm not sure how long it'll take yet. First, we're going to look at the construction of dress before the Revolution by making a sack gown from the bottom up, all undergarments included. Then, in later videos, we're going to do the same with a post-revolutionary round gown. Today, we're going to recreate a pair of stays from 1789, the same year the Revolution began. I will be using the pattern made from this extant garment in Patterns of Fashion 5. This video will focus mainly on the construction process, so check out my blog linked in the description below for some more detailed, fleshed out research. Let's begin! The first step of creating these stays is the most complicated. Because I'm following an existing garment found in a book at 1/4 scale, I must first scale up this pattern using a scale ruler and grid paper. Then I alter the pattern to make it fit me, at least in theory. This involves a lot of math and tedious measuring. Finally, once the pattern is done, I cut out the pieces of cheap poly fabric from my stash and sew them together to test the fit. The fit was bad. I was so distracted about how bad it was that I forgot to film it, which honestly, it's probably better that there's no photographic evidence of that. Anyway, the mock-up told me that I needed to widen the front pieces about 2 more inches and take 3 inches out of the back 2 pieces. I also needed to lengthen all 4 panels below the waist by about 1 inch. I made these changes on my paper pattern and then went to bed. I dreamed of the stays that night. Should I have done a second mock-up? Absolutely. Kids always do a second mock-up. Now, let's talk about the materials. All right, now we have all the materials. So this is our linen lining fabric. This will be against the skin, and therefore this is the only one that I've washed. This is the outside lining fabric. It's also a linen. It's a linen twill, which means the weave is slightly different, but I've got 2 meters of it because I'm going to double up on it because it's not as thick as historical linen twill would have been. And then for the lining layers and the buckram, I've got this 10-ounce linen canvas. It is, it's going to be the lining layer. And then I've got this linen ribbon for the edging, this linen ribbon for the seams, some linen thread, and then 20 meters of fake baleen boning. For all the boning. It's pretty thin, and there's going to be a bunch of boning channels. Buckram is a stiffening material used to make the body of the stays more rigid. Based on some quick research, I learned that modern buckram is not really the same as historical buckram, but luckily, for the low price of stinking up your entire apartment, you can make buckram that's as accurate to the 18th century. Now that all the layers are ready, there is one more preparatory step before we can really start making this garment. All 4 layers of each panel must be basted together. I pad stitched down the middle and then used a running stitch around the edges to outline the seam lines. Now we're finally ready to sew. Unlike Victorian-era corsets, many stays had boning placed as the very first step. These stays are fully boned, meaning that every single inch of the garment is covered in 1/4 inch wide whalebone. To create the boning channels, I drew lines a 1/4 inch wide onto the buckram. The only exception is that the boning at the center back is 1/2 inch wide and much thicker than the others. This makes the center back sturdier. Like many costume historians, I have had dreams of hand sewing a pair of stays, but today is not that day. The channels will be done by my best girl, my sewing machine. Then, using a sophisticated method of chopstick and rubber band, I wiggle all the boning into place. Once that is done, I whip stitch the excess seam allowance down to the back of each panel. It doesn't have to be pretty, it just has to happen. Now, the panels are whip stitched together. This is different from any other garment I've made, as traditionally a backstitch is used while leaving the seam allowance loose. I am dubious as to the strength of the technique, but this is a time-tested method. Once the panels have been stitched together, eyelets are the next step. On the front, there are 6 on each side and 10 on either side of the center back. Eyelets are made by working open the fabric with an awl and then whip stitching around the created hole. Because the stays will be spiral laced, the eyelets on the back are offset. To reinforce the seams between the panels, and to make it look neat, strips of linen tape are sewn over them. I've pulled the tape tight over the top, but I'm leaving the bottoms loose for right now. At this point, the stays may look almost finished, but boy are they not. We've still got a ways to go. The pattern shows strips of canvas at the top and the bottom to reinforce the edges. I cut these pieces out of some scraps from earlier, not focusing too much on getting the same shape. I'm more worried about lining the grain up with the center front. Now for a bit of a pivot. An essential part of stays or corsets is a strong piece of metal or wood that is placed along the center front to support and separate the breasts. Because I'm insane, I decided not to purchase a wooden busk, but to instead buy paint sticks, glue them together, and then spend 3 hours on a Monday night sanding them down to size. So there's that. Next up, the busk gets placed to the side for a while. I made a little pocket out of white linen to sit behind the front lacing. Then I bound the top because I am done with it fraying so much. Hey y'all, so as you may have noticed, the stays are not quite finished. Unfortunately, I didn't order enough linen twill tape initially, and so I cannot bind the edges of the bottom. And due to the current world events, the order coming from the States is taking longer, much longer than expected. So that means these are not going to be finished by the video deadline. However, I'm going to quickly go over what is left to do when the twill tape arrives, and then when I see you next time to make the rest of the undergarments, I'll have this done as well, and then I'll get to model it for you, and I'll model them all together. So the next step would have been to add the reinforcement layers at the center front. This is what the book gives for layers, but I don't really get how the busk is secured like that. So I added another canvas piece the same size as the buckram to sandwich the busk between, as seen here. So the busk is right here. Obviously you can't see it, I've sewn them down. This sandwich is then tacked to the center front, and then the other 3 layers of canvas are added above it. So it will go like this down the center front. Then the final step will be adding the white lining. First by marking the outline of the stays with washable marker on the lining, and then folding over the seam allowance and pressing it so it stays flat without pinning. Then the lining will be felled down onto the stays. And then they'd be done. Even though they are not finished, I've already learned so much about the complicated and detailed process that is stay making, and understand why this was a profession that you apprenticed for years to do. So many structural aspects are included in this garment to mold the body into the ideal conical shape of the era, and it's insanely impressive engineering. These stays are only one part of the complicated historical silhouette, however. Come back next time to see the finished stays, and join me as I make the rest of the pre-revolutionary garments, the chemise, the petticoat, and the panniers. All right, thank you so much for watching. That's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed, even though it was a little shorter than intended. And have a great day. I'll see you later.